Alright, so we've made a few tier lists here on the channel, and I was talking about doing a silver or like 3-star tier list, but I didn't want it to be, like 4 hours long. So I asked you guys, like, should we just break things up into like 3 separate 3-star tier lists? We're gonna do the knight classes, the cavalry classes, and the extra classes, and everybody seemed to like that idea. So we're gonna do that with like the 3, the 4s, and the 5 stars. Just expect these to drop when FGO is kind of in a more like quote unquote dead period. I know we're not like in a dead period right now, but we're leaving one event on NA and JP's kind of just finished their anniversary. So it's a bit of a dead period, so I can get away with throwing this video out there. But if you enjoy FGO content, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff, because I upload these videos daily, and that's all that I ask for in return. Now, this roster of servants are all pretty solid, so I'm pretty excited to be able to talk with a lot of these characters. I don't know why we have a D tier, because I feel like just having these 4 tiers pretty much is going to help me make my point, just solidly on its own. We have the secretly 5-star servants. Those are the servants that people are grailing all the time, or you're probably going to be using excessively for how good they are, unless you're some whale and you have like NP5 Skahawk and you're like, why would I ever need to use Ku when I just start nuking people for 500 million damage? Okay, you people, you maybe you're not going to use these servants, right? But then you have the very solid servants. Like, those are just guys that I highly recommend you level up. You might not use them in every single battle, but you can definitely get some good use out of them if you choose to bring them. Then there's average servants, where they're not really exceptional, but they have some uses here or there. And then we have the dookie servants, and if you're a more experienced player, you're looking at some of the servants on this list, and I'm sure you can already tell who the dookie servants are. Now, we're gonna go ahead and start off with Sabres. Now, you need to get over there, buddy. Join your buddies, all right? Sabres actually pretty interesting, because there's only 3 silver Sabres in the entire game, which I think is really interesting. Like, Sabres is almost like a very, I guess, higher rarity heavy class, but the Sabres we have available to us are actually really good. So, let's just start off with Bedivere, the secret 5-star one. Bedivere is insane, because after his buff, even before his buff, he was really good, because he's giving party NP damage, he has a 30% battery, his NP hits really hard, because you should be able to get more copies of him. I know he's story locked, but he's usually on pretty decent banners, and when he's on those banners, he's the rate up 3-star, so it's pretty easy to get him when he does come around. I know some people are going to be like, he only comes out every, so-and-so every... Well, you just gotta be mindful, especially as an NA player. If you're on the NA side, if you know Bedivere's coming up, he's one of those servants that I'm like, maybe consider summoning on that banner, because he's just secretly this good. And like, after his buff, if you're an NA player, look at this. Not only is he now giving NP damage, he's giving like 30% NP gain as well. And let's also remember, they buffed his NP, so now he's getting a fat Buster performance on top of that, which means this Buster buff and this NP damage buff, those are multiplying into each other. He's given defense, like, he's just stupid, right? He's just like stupid good. Like, everything he does is crazy. And then on both skill 3 and skill 2, he's giving himself like some debuff resistances as well, so it's kind of hard to actually get Bedivere on anything. But I'm really hoping that if they buff this in the future, they make these both like 3 turns, because then you could do defensive memes, and you can maybe bump that up to 100% to give the entire party 100% debuff resistance. I think that would just make him even better. But already as it is, if you need something dead, you can just bring Bedivere, right? He's really good for that. Now, Caesar, I know a lot of people are going to crucify me for that. I know he's really good. Like, I know he's very solid. He has a charisma, and then he has a party-wide NP damage buff. If you look right here, like skill 1, he's giving NP damage, he's giving attack for 3 turns, and then he has this insane crit damage buff, that's targetable to one ally. Unfortunately, it's reducing their defense. And then he's got a decently hard-hitting NP with 10 hits. That's going to be dropping a lot of stars on top of its overcharge effect down there. But I think what kind of holds him back just a little bit for me is that we just need to get some buffs for these first 2 skills. Not that. We need to get some buffs for these first 2 skills here, where, like, if they round out this charisma to like the 20% and they slap maybe a party-wide like 20% crit damage buff, I know that's not a lot, but if you combine that with this, and you're really probably just going to be slapping this on one person anyway, I think that's going to be really, really solid. And then if we just bump this up to like the thing that Bedivere just got, where he's got the 20% for 3 turns, I think that could both make Caesar just an insanely good either DPS servant if you want to focus on him, or it can make him a really solid secondary DPS servant that's also supporting the party a lot. Now, I might flip-flop on that. I might throw Caesar in the top tier. I actually might go ahead and just do that now, actually. The more, I think I've convinced myself that I think he's actually that good. Because even now, the fact that he can give you these two things, you know, double buff your entire party with NP damage and the charisma, the attack buff here, that just means he's providing a lot of damage for everybody, right? Because it's not just, oh, we have a 16% buff and an 18% buff. Because they're different buff types, because it's an NP buff and an attack buff, for those of you guys that don't know, those multiply into each other to actually give you more damage. Just for the rundown for newer players, if you didn't know, when you're trying to buff your servants, you want to try to diversify the buffs as much as possible. There's the special damage buffs, where it's like special damage against lawful, special damage against humans. Then there's card buffs, like Buster Quick Arts card buffs, attack buffs, and then NP damage buffs. Those are the 4 different types, and they all multiply into each other. So you want to diversify your buffs as much as possible. And, you know, him giving both of these for free, I think is really solid. I mean, we've seen Emiya get his skill buffed a second time, so maybe they buff this again. This is already really insane. If they just slap that off and then make this at least 50%, give him like, you know, give him 3 turns of star weight as well, and we're cooking with Caesar. But I still think he's quite good. I mean, because he's not story limited like Bedivere, you actually have the benefit of probably getting him to NP5. Like, if you don't have an NP5 Caesar, it's probably because you're burning him because, you know, he's fat. And I know people don't like Caesar because he's fat, but he's good, I promise. He's really, really good. If you've never used Caesar, I highly advise you take him out for a spin, you know? Go try out Caesar. He's very good, especially because if you're not lucky enough to pull on a lot of those banners where Bedivere comes on rate up, or you're not a madman that's pulling on the story gacha, he's probably going to be your only guaranteed 3-star Saber, right? Which is really unfortunate, because I don't even consider this guy to really be in the running. He could be so good. If you look at his skills, dude, imagine if these were all party-wide buffs. Like, imagine if he's giving this, and then he's giving the NP gen to the entire party, and then he's giving a Buster performance. Now, maybe not these numbers. Maybe a 45% NP gen buff for the entire party and a 40% Buster buff for the entire party would have been too much. But at the same time, we live in a meta where there's Koyanskaya, where there's Castoria, where there's Merlin, where Tamamo's now crazy, where we just have all... Scotty is out there making quick servant stupid, Crane is running around. We have all of these really stupid buff servants, and the fact that this guy, like, basically does nothing on his NP, I mean, like, whoop-de-doo, you give yourself a 50% attack buff and then guarantee that you get one shot by somebody, you know, whoop-de-doo. Like, I'm glad you have that. If he at least had all 3 of these, he could have just been an absolute killer, like, pump and dump Buster support. Like, if he had all of those, he would be in, like, the solid or even the secretly 5-star tier. He would be on the same level of, like, Amadeus, but for Buster servants instead of art servants. He would have been so crazy, giving, you know, the ability to give massive Buster damage, massive NP gen, which Buster servants want, giving them NP damage. And then if you were able to get his NP, it really wouldn't matter because he's dropping stars for them to do big crits. But because, you know, he's giving himself NP gain, he's giving himself the Buster buff just to get it to his NP, where he's going to be reliant on doing card damage, where he's a 3-star, his attack's already not all that high. So doing those, you know, hits really aren't going to hit all that different. He has no crit buff to make those crits really hit different. And he's neutering his defense, so he's basically just going to die anyway. So it's just like, I don't know, like, they need them to, like, just massively buff this dude. That's all I have to say about that one. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking about some of these archers. So for some reason, Tauta did not make it on the list, so I guess I would probably put him in, like, this average tier. Like, he's very usable, but he doesn't have anything that really makes him super broken. I mean, if you just look at his kit, you're like, okay, getting a solid Buster buff, getting a nice, you know, Coup Dodge-esque skill. This really doesn't make a huge difference most of the time. This is when max HP was first being introduced into the game, and so they were like, oh, we gotta, like, throw it on all of these different servants because this might be a cool new mechanic, and it's fine. Like, it kind of functions as, like, a minor heal if you want to think of it that way, so it's fine. He has a nice little niche against demonic enemies, but for whatever reason, they really gimped him on this one, because usually the damage mod for things is like 150% to 200%. So I have no idea why they just massively shafted him by giving him 50 to 100%, especially because he's a 3-star. Like, even if, like, I don't know what the basis is for them, like, just limiting this to 50%, but he's a 3-star. Just give him the 150% anyway. Like, just help him out a little bit. So, again, don't know how I missed Tota. I thought I got everybody, but if he was on the list, he'd be like somewhere around here. So now we can talk about everybody else. Billy's very solid for me. I don't have him as high as most other people do, because he kind of lets me down sometimes. But I understand the mileage that people do get out of him, because his main thing is that he's got 2 massive crit buffs. The first one here is 120% for 1 turn. Now, that means you're going to choke slam somebody into the ground with this massive crit damage. Doesn't mean that doesn't matter that he's a 3-star with only like, almost 7k attack. You buff your crits that much, they're going to do a lot of damage, especially because he got another 30% right there. So he's got 152% crit damage, right? With the 50% battery, which means he has synergy for farming. The only issue is that, like, his NP damage, even as like a free NP5, kind of lets me down sometimes. So while I do think you could use him as a farmer, like 50% is very good with a lot of those event CEs, because a lot of the standard event CEs now have one of them with the 50% battery innate to it. Whether it's one of the gacha CEs, whether it's one of the free-to-play CEs, one of them usually has a 50% battery on it, which means he's going to be very good for that. Although I really don't think he's meant to be used in farming. I think his kit clearly is tailored towards him fighting in challenge quests, with him having the built-in pierce evasion, him having the ability to do massive burst turns with the crits. It's just, he kind of lets me down sometimes with his damage. I know that I'm over here gassing him up, talking about how he has all this crit damage and everything. He is legitimately very good, but when I tend to use him, he tends to let me down. I don't know if that's because I don't have my own Scotty, so I can't bring him up to just the infamous meme levels of crit, with Scotty giving him an additional, 200% crit damage, 100% quick buffs, lowering the enemy's defense massively so he can just obliterate people. I don't know if that's the reason. I have no idea what it is, but I do still recognize that he is very solid as a free-to-play option with his massive battery and his massive amounts of crit damage to do burst turns. Next on the chopping block is David. David's a very solid, I would say, support-type servant, with his ability to give the entire party the infamous, Harp of Healing skill, where he's able to cleanse all of their debuffs, gives them a minor heal, doesn't really matter, but the main thing here is that he basically has Merlin's skill, except it's evasion and it only lasts for 1 attack, but it's like Merlin's skill in the way that it's just an AoE nope skill. Like, I'm going to protect everybody for 1 turn, which I think is really solid. He also has the ability to give a little bit of attack. He does some decent damage with his NP, nothing's too insane unless they're giants, but I think he's definitely a very solid servant. If you're a newer player, David is a very good way to introduce you to, like, a hybrid DPS slash support type servant, because everything he's doing is, bringing some utility to the party. He's bringing, evasion, debuff cleansing, attack, sealing enemy skills is very helpful, because you can prevent the enemy or like a potential like big boy boss from popping their NP skill when they have like 1 tick left and surprise NPing you. It's really good for that. David's definitely a very, very solid servant. Kid Gil, I don't want to put Kid Gil in Dookie, because I don't think he's quite that bad, but if you just look at Kid Gil, it's just, I don't know, they took him in a very weird direction, right? So he still has, like, the insane golden rule that the 5-star archer has. He has the same insane charisma, but instead of having the Star Gather skill that has a 30% battery, he has a chance to charm a humanoid, and then he gets 10 stars per turn, which I guess is fine for him because they nerfed his hits severely, because the 5-star Gilgamesh has like 50 billion hits on everything for no reason. It's stupid broken. But him, they nerfed his hits, so like 5-star Gilgamesh can just be whatever he wants. He can massively gen NP, he can gen a lot of stars, he can do big boy crit turns, he can do whatever he wants. But this guy does kind of need that. It kind of fixes up his hits a little bit, I believe, but then his NP, I was like, I don't know, you guys, you couldn't have just given him Aya as well. Like, in Prisma Ilia, he does use Aya. You couldn't have given him the whole, Aya insane effect where he does extra damage to servants. This is fine. Reducing the enemy NP damage by 50% is insane. Reducing their crit damage is insane, but then, like, you're lowering their debuff resistance, like, I don't know, dog. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's really, if you want to use it as a support NP, I guess it's fine, but I don't think I need to justify that Kid Gil is pretty average. He needs to get some buffs, but I think they're kind of waiting to see what they're going to do with the 5-star Gil, because they'll probably give them the exact same buffs for their first and third skill, so we'll see about that. Robin Hood, already made a video on Robin Hood. Robin Hood is very solid. Robin Hood is disgustingly good. Basically, you poison somebody, you slap them with your NP, and that's it. He's got a massive NP gain buff. He has a dodge to keep him alive. You know, the NP gain buff is to make sure that he can, like, loop his NP and just keep firing it, right? And the fact that the poison buff, which, correct me if I'm wrong, the poison buff does last, he's not even up here, but the poison buff, correct me, I think it lasts for 5 turns, so it definitely allows you to just keep slapping down your opponent, which is very powerful. William Tell, I also think, is up there in the very solid tier. I think this guy does get slept on, but if you, like, look at what he's doing, he's, like, a very good, you know, lockdown type of guy, where it's, like, he's piercing evasion, he's sealing all the skills, you know, and then he has the ability to, like, buff his arts cards, you know, which is going to help his NP gain out. He has built-in crit damage, which I think is also very good. Like, he's just a very solid 4-star servant. I don't know if he cracks up into this tier quite as much, because I don't know if I would use William Tell as much as some of these other guys. It almost makes me question if, like, these guys should be up there. Because honestly, like, I think William Tell is as good, if not maybe a little bit better than Bedivere, as, like, a single target for his class, considering everything he does. Because he does pretty much the same things that Bedivere does, minus the battery, but it doesn't need the battery because it's an art servant, and he can refund and loop his NP a lot easier. Plus, he has the built-in crit damage and everything. I think I'm going to slap him up there. I do think he's quite that good. Then people might get mad about Robin Hood not being that high, but Robin Hood is a very one-trick pony. He's a very solid one-trick pony, where he's just going to do massive NP damage, but, you know, that's pretty much all you're going to break him out for. Not to say that Robin Hood is bad, and not to say that, you know, he's a dookie servant, you shouldn't level him. I'm just saying, I think these servants have a bit more diversity, and they have more roles you can bring them in. Then we have Yurio. I want to put Yurio in really solid. I think I am, because she still has a very good anti-male niche, and she's going to be a lot of players' answers for Gawain in in Camelot, that's what it's called, because she has this massive extra damage against males enemy, right? She has this very, very good damage, right? And then she also has a chance to charm lock them. Dude, I can't speak today. Because she has this on her NP, and I believe it's one of her skills as well. Yeah, right here. She can also charm an enemy. She has a built-in battery over here, which is very solid. A 3-turn arts buff over here, which is going to help out her, you know, her arts cards and help her loop her NP. Not that she really needed it anyway, because, you know, her NP charge per attack is pretty good. But I guess it's there to help buff these, because she has 1 hit on her NP, which is probably the only knock against her. But, you know, she's very good at killing male sabers and male berserkers, right? She's very good in that aspect, and I mean, I still use her even to this day whenever I have to fight a male saber or a male berserker, because she's just really fun to use, because she basically locks them down. Between the 2 charms, the ability to steal their NP and charge her own NP, and then kind of sustain herself with the arts buff, I think makes her very solid. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and move into some of these Lancers, which, I mean, these guys are pretty easy for me to do. I mean, like, this guy, okay, this guy's literally just this coup, right? Except he's out here with built-in crit damage, and he has, like, a special damage mod against big boy enemies if we pull this dude up. So I think he's really good. I think he's very slept on as well, because whenever people talk about coup, they just completely forget about Prototype. But, like, let's not forget, built-in crit damage has the same dodge skill as the other coup. He doesn't have the, you know, the guts and the debuff cleanse or anything, but he's got this, like, massive, like, damage against big boy beast enemies, and then the star absorption pairs very nicely with the crit damage. His NP does, like, still pretty decent damage because he's got this all built in here, so, like, he's definitely very good. I have no problem saying that Coup Proto is definitely up here being very solid. It's just nobody talks about him, because this coup, I think people are just going to use more times out of 10, because he has such amazing sustain. He is so hard to put down, and for a 3-star, he's just infamous for that. Whereas Coup Prototype wasn't built that perfectly when he came out, so I feel like people have a bit of a more negative reaction to him. They don't see him in that good of a light, but after the NP buff and after getting that third skill buff where you get the star absorption, he's definitely competitive up there. He's definitely very good. The other one I want to go ahead and put up here is Hozowing. I feel like people really do sleep on Hozowing as well. You know, OG players remember when this guy came out, because let's just look at his NP. Just look at this. Just peep, dude. Look at this. Big boy attack buff, right? Then he's getting some redonkadonk crit damage, giving himself some evasion. It only lasts for one time, but you know, we come up here, you know, he's dropping a bunch of crit stars, and you know, he's got a pretty high NP gen stat, so he should be able to kind of like sustain loop his NP to at least keep the evasions up. And then he's just dumping stars all over the place. Like, this on its own is crazy. You're like, okay, this is a really good kind of sustain servant, but like, there is no running, there is no hiding from this dude. He pokes you through your NP, and then he's gonna make sure those quick cards really sting. You can't stun him, you can't like stop him in his tracks or anything, you know, because he's got that plus this built-in magic resistance. And then you can't even catch him off guard with an NP. You know, if you're like, oh man, I really wish I could use my NP this turn. I'm 10% NP off, and you know, Hozowing's like, I got you covered. Bam, seal their NP, reduce their damage or their defense, so I can do extra damage. Hozowing is really good. Hozowing is cracked, and you guys know that I really like Bleach, and this dude straight up just looks like Ikaku, so he gets bonus points for that. Hozowing is crazy. If you haven't leveled up your Hozowing, and dude, especially if you could pair this dude with like Scotty or something, it makes it really, really fun. It actually is a really fun time. I've only gotten to use him with one Scotty because I don't have my own Scotty, but it's very fun to use him in that aspect, especially because then at that point you have like 300% quick crit damage, and you know, he's just flooding the entire field with stars, dude, especially if you're getting his quick chain. So he's redonkulously good. Okay. People are probably screaming at me because I forgot about Fergus. People are probably screaming at me because I forgot about Fergus. Let me just slap him over here in the average usable tier. I mean, let's just go ahead and look at Fergus real quick. Like, I know people were screaming at me because I was like, man, I was like, there's only 3 of them. I could have sworn there was another one, but Fergus is almost like this weird mishmash type servant, because it's basically like, I got my attack skill and I got my defensive skill, but you have to pop this one first, otherwise it negates this. Like, just really weird year 1 design. It's very similar to Lu Bu, except Lu Bu at least has, you know, some leeway because he's a berserker. And then if they just gave him, I know for lore reasons they can't do this, but if they just gave him the same coup skill, right? Because, you know, they both train under Scott Hawk, right? Just give him the coup skill, just give him the 3 dodges, right? I think he would have been super crazy, but as it stands right now, he's literally just a generic beat stick. Like, he's like, I got attack, I got defense, but make sure you pop that attack skill first, otherwise I'm missing out on pretty much all of my attack. I have some basic survivability, my NP really doesn't do anything remarkable, so, you know, thumbs up. I'm sorry, Fergus, I'm sorry I forgot about you, but you're not very remarkable, dude. I think the same thing can be said for really the rest of these guys. Like, Hector's pretty average as well. Like, if we pull up Hector, like, he's not bad, but Hector doesn't do anything particularly super great if we look at him. Like, he does have the party-wide NP damage, like, that's pretty good. You know, the DR is fine, I guess. Like, nice. You know, some lockdown, chance of stun, like, removes own debuff. Like, it's just not, like, super crazy. I feel like they really could have slapped Pierce invincibility on this, and this would have given him some use, but it seems like they tried to make him kind of off, right? You can see that he kind of suffers from, you know, year 1 design, but even when they try to come back and fix him, I'm like, you're gonna give him damage reduction? Like, why not just make that 3 turns instead of the 2 attacks? I don't know, maybe that would have been too broken, but again, they're 3 stars, right? They're nothing super, they're not gacha, you know, 5-star big boy servants. Like, they got to compete with these guys, so we got to make them as good as we possibly can if we want people to use them. And I don't know, Hector just seems okay. Like, maybe give him like the Penthesilia buff at least, where he does big boy damage. Like, I'm talking 200 to 300% damage against Greek mythological males. Maybe that'd be pretty good, because Hercules pops up pretty often, and it'd be pretty good for him. Be good if you run into Hector, or not Hector, if you run into Achilles. But I don't know, he just doesn't really strike me as like a super amazing servant. Jaguar Man, I'm more inclined to put in very solid, just because Jaguar Man allows for some absolute nonsense tomfoolery. Jaguar Man does have that want to be on a forest, battlefield, but as you can see here in the third skill, she pretty much gets everything she needs without being on the forest skill, because the main thing she gets for free is the crit damage. The Star Weight and the Star Gen, those are both nice, but if you have like someone with like, say Merlin, who's providing just a plethora of stars for Jaguar Man, you don't really have a need to really get the star absorption because there's enough stars on the field for her to play around with. But then, I mean, then you just have like a basic, pretty decent attack buff and then a basic, pretty decent buster buff. Only real knock is that this lasts for 10 turns, but I mean, at the very least, she's kind of got like a baby coup skill that's very good for survivability. Like, I think she's definitely solid. And again, maybe they buff her NP and then she can get bumped up to here. I don't know what they would slap on here. Really don't, because this overcharge is kind of beyond saving, so they're gonna have to slap on a new effect. Maybe she could give herself the forest battlefield, kind of like how Gawain does on one of his skills. Maybe they do that, and that'd actually probably propel her. It wouldn't propel her to being up here, but it would definitely make her placement here a bit more solid. It's just when I look at these guys, they just seem very one-dimensional, where Jaguar Man actually has a bit that she's actually doing for herself, so I'm more willing to put her up here and very solid. Same thing with Romulus. Romulus, I think the main thing that saves him from just being a basic beatstick is that they gave him a battery and that he has Imperial Privilege, and then now there's so many characters that can buff your buff success rate that getting Imperial Privileges off is really not all that uncommon now. Plus, between this skill and this skill, he has 7,400 HP he can heal for himself, which is pretty much all of his HP back, which is pretty crazy. Anytime that, like, a character has Imperial Privilege now, it's going to be super broken, because I know it's like, oh, but it's a 60% chance, but like I'm saying, you have, like, so many characters now, and you have a plethora of different CEs that you'll probably pull if you really care about it, to give yourself an 8 buff success rate to guarantee these Imperial Privileges, which then at that point is a free 44% attack and defense, which is crazy. Plus, his third skill when they gave it to him was a very nice little buff. I really wish this was 3 turns, because if it's gonna be 30%, it's usually supposed to be 3 turns. If it's gonna be a 1-turn thing, why not just make it a 50% Buster Mana Burst? But whatever, it's a targetable Guts, so it can either give him some survivability, or it can just, I don't know, man, or you can give it to an ally. I'm a little upset at it, because I'm like, it's a good step in the right direction, but I could definitely foresee, like, come on, just give this another bust. Like, maybe make that 3 turns, make this 3 turns, and I think we're really cooking. I think he could definitely be a lot better, but I think the thing that definitely does save him is the fact that he has a 20% battery, that Imperial Privilege is pretty easy to get off now with all of the servants that have buff success rate, and that can help your allies out. And then the fact that they actually gave him a pretty decent third skill to help out his damage. I mean, he's a Buster Servant. Maybe they can buff his NP. Again, I don't know what they'll do. I don't know. Maybe have it drop stars. Because his NP already has this kind of, like, support type ability. Maybe buff that to start off at 20%, so it's like a charisma, and it goes up to, like, 50%. Because nobody's ever getting the 500% anyway. Ooh, I don't want to do that. No one's ever getting up here anyway, so you could make this 1,000,000% attack, and I doubt very many people would ever get up there. Because most people usually aren't going for that. Usually you get your NP to, like, 100% and you're firing it anyway, so just have it be like a slider from like 20 to 50%, and then maybe he also gives, either himself 50% crit damage for 3 turns, or he drops like 30 stars for the entire party to play around with, or drops like 30 stars and then gives the entire party 30% crit damage. Any one of those combinations I think would be really good, like nice additions to his kit. Probably wouldn't propel him into being a secret 5-star, but again, would definitely solidify him up here. I do think the thing that majorly keeps him here, though, is the fact that he has a 20% battery, which is going to be very, very good for new players, because, it's guaranteed. You don't even have to waste materials on this. As a new player, if you level up Romulus, you don't have to waste materials. You can leave this at 1, because it's a guaranteed 20% battery. And when I'm thinking about doing this 3-star tier list, I'm thinking a lot about newer players, and they're going to have to use a lot of these servants. So then we have another potential candidate for Dookie, but I'm going to try to keep Diarmuid out of there, because look, I like Diarmuid. I think Diarmuid's cool, but it's really hard to try to keep him out of there. But, like, it's got the generic evasion. That's pretty good. This skill is dummy useless. I mean, some people are going to be like, but that's a massive attack reduction. It's like, you're going to bring him to fight females. Against everybody else, it's completely useless. And then look at this. Really, dude? You're gonna get a 50% crit star gen with those quick cards and that star gen stat? Yeah, good luck, bro. Good luck, homie. And then this is such a good effect on NPs. Removing buffs is so powerful, but if only it activated first. Like, I hate seeing removes buffs on NPs and then it doesn't proc first, because the reason it's so good is that it basically functions as like a Pierce invincibility, a Pierce defense, remove solemn defense. It basically turns it into you cannot run, hide, or go anywhere because this NP will kill you. And it could have been a saving grace for Diarmuid, but it activates after he hits. And then it slaps Curse on them, which is borderline useless. If he was a better servant, he'd have some synergy with Van Gogh and all them and Ashia Doman, but he doesn't. So yeah, I don't think there's actually any way for me to save Diarmuid. He is a dookie servant. He is bad. I understand if you level up Diarmuid because you like Diarmuid, he's cool in Fate Zero, but no, he's beyond redemption. I think I'm liking how this list looks though. I got a few comments on the last video. People were saying that like, oh, please, you know, kind of have an idea of your tier list before you go into it. So I kind of wrote out where I wanted my tier list to go before I went into this, but I'm also open to kind of discussing and maybe changing my mind as I go through, and that's obviously why, you know, Caesar got bumped up here. But this is kind of what I'm working with. You know, feel free to yell at me in the comments down below and call me a big dumb dummy and be like, I don't think Caesar is better than Robin Hood, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I think I gave pretty decent reasons while keeping it quick and concise for why I have certain servants in different areas. You know, I know that we're going to disagree on some of them because I know some people really love Billy the Kid and Robin Hood. I think they really, really like those servants. But at the same time, I really like using Yurio, and I'm still keeping her in very solid. She's one of my most used 3-star servants. So, you know, just keep that in mind. The next one I'm going to do is going to be for the cavalry classes. So, you know, we'll be talking about Ushi and all those other good servants in there. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You know, you guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Dude, I almost forgot my own outro. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.